When I found that photograph, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but no matter how many times I blinked, the faces staring back refused to change. There was my husband, Caleb, standing in a suit I'd never seen before, smiling at a woman in a white wedding dress, and that woman was Julia's sister. For a long moment, I couldn't even breathe. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the photo album. I remember the faint smell of dust and cedar rising from the old box, the way the sunlight cut through the blinds in narrow, accusing stripes. It was one of those moments when the world doesn't explode, it just stops, quietly, cruelly. But before I tell you how everything unraveled, I should tell you how I got here, how we got here, because things weren't always broken. Once, I believed I had the kind of marriage people admired from afar. Back then, life was simple in the sweetest ways. Caleb and I had been married for 7 years. We lived in a small, ivy-covered house on the edge of Maplewood, a quiet town where everyone knew each other's business, but they pretended not to. He was a real estate agent, calm and steady, with that kind of easy smile that made people trust him. I worked as an elementary school teacher. My life revolved around lesson plans, coffee-stained papers, and the sound of little shoes squeaking on the hallway floor. Julia had been my best friend since college. She was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and make it brighter just by laughing. She ran a small floral shop downtown, a place that always smelled like lavender and eucalyptus. Her younger sister, Lauren, was around sometimes, helping with deliveries, though she and I were never especially close. Lauren was quieter, more reserved, the kind of girl who smiled politely but kept her distance. Still, there were no warning signs, no strange messages, no hidden tension in Caleb's tone when Julia's name came up. Nothing. We had our routines, our dinners on the porch, our weekend drives with the radio humming low, the kind of quiet comfort that makes you think you've built something real. I thought love was like that. Peaceful, predictable, earned over time. If only I'd known peace can sometimes be the silence before the storm. It started with a Saturday morning, the kind where the air smelled like rain, but the sky hadn't decided what to do yet. I was cleaning out the guest room closet. It was a simple, mindless task. I wanted to donate old clothes, clear the clutter before school started again. I didn't expect to find a box wedged in the corner, covered with an old blanket. When I opened it, I found an assortment of old letters, a few trinkets, and then beneath a layer of tissue paper, a small wedding album wrapped in a silk ribbon. My first thought was that it belonged to someone else. Maybe something Caleb picked up at an estate sale. He loved old things, vintage books, antiques, things with history. But when I loosened the ribbon and turned the first page, the air left my body. The album was small, maybe 20 pages. And there, printed on thick, glossy paper, was my husband Caleb standing in front of a chapel I'd never seen. His arm was around a woman whose face I recognized too well. Lauren, Julia's sister. I remember whispering her name under my breath like it might change something. Lauren. My voice cracked, and I felt this heavy, sinking confusion twist inside me. The date scribbled at the bottom of the photo said 2014, 2 years before Caleb and I met. I couldn't make sense of it. The rational part of my brain tried to find explanations. Maybe it was a styled shoot, maybe a modeling gig. But deep down, I knew better. There was no pretending with the way they looked at each other. That wasn't acting. I sat on the floor for a long time, the edges of the album digging into my knees, until I finally closed it and hid it back in the box. Not because I wanted to protect him, but because I couldn't face what it meant. Not yet. That evening, I cooked dinner like nothing had happened. Caleb came home late, loosened his tie, kissed me on the forehead. Long day? I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. He smiled. You have no idea. I'm just glad to be home. That night, when he reached for my hand in bed, I almost pulled away. But I didn't. Instead, I stared into the dark and counted his breaths, wondering how many lies they carried. The next morning, I drove to Julia's shop. I told myself I just wanted to see her, to feel something normal again. She greeted me with her usual cheer, her hair tied back, her apron dusted with pollen. Morning, stranger. Coffee or gossip first? She teased. I tried to smile. Gossip. Always gossip. We laughed, but something in me was trembling. I wanted to ask her about Lauren, about that photo, about why she never mentioned Caleb before. But how could I? What if I was wrong? What if I wasn't? She noticed my silence eventually. You okay? You look a little off. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. I left the shop with a bouquet I didn't remember asking for and a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. That night, I dreamed of the photograph again, the way Lauren's veil caught the light, the way Caleb's hand rested on her back. In the dream, I reached out to touch the photo, But the image melted, and all that was left was my reflection. When I woke up, I decided I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I didn't confront Caleb right away. Maybe part of me was afraid of what he'd say, afraid that the truth would make everything real. So instead, I started watching, listening, paying attention to the small things I used to overlook. It's strange how, once suspicion enters your heart, even silence feels heavy. I noticed how Caleb's phone was always face down on the counter now. How he'd step out to take calls instead of answering them in front of me. How he'd suddenly grow quiet when I mentioned Julia, or when Lauren's name slipped out in conversation. The mind has a way of replaying moments differently once the seed of doubt is planted. I remembered the time, a few months earlier, when Julia had mentioned her sister's divorce. She'd said it casually, while arranging roses. Oh, Lauren's doing better now. Took her a while to get over it, though. You know how first loves are. At the time, I'd only nodded. But now, those words burned in my head. First love. Divorce. Took her a while to get over it. Had I been living next to Ghost this whole time? I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts were always somewhere else. One afternoon, during a break, my colleague Clara noticed me staring blankly at a stack of spelling tests. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay? You've been off lately." I forced a smile. "Just didn't sleep well." She tilted her head. "Married life trouble?" I laughed, but it came out thin and brittle. "No, nothing like that." But inside, I was unraveling. That evening, I went through the album again. I studied every photo like a detective, searching for clues. In one picture, I saw Caleb and Lauren exchanging vows. In another, they were cutting a cake laughing, surrounded by people. One of those people was Julia, standing right there, smiling, throwing petals. So she knew. My best friend had known. It was like being stabbed with the realization that everyone around me had been part of a story I was never told. That weekend, Caleb suggested we go to dinner at Julia's place. "We haven't seen her in a while," he said casually, slipping on his jacket. "She mentioned she's hosting a little get-together." The invitation sounded innocent enough, but I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to say no, but if I did, it would seem suspicious. So I smiled and said, "Sure." Julia's home smelled like rosemary and lemon. The dining table was already set when we arrived, wine glasses glinting under soft light. A vase of fresh hydrangeas in the center. She looked genuinely happy to see us, but I couldn't meet her eyes for long. And then I saw her Lauren coming down the stairs. Holding a tray of appetizers like this was just another family gathering. My fingers went cold. Caleb smiled politely at her. A restrained kind of smile, but one that didn't belong to a stranger. "Lauren," he said, nodding. "Caleb," she replied softly. The air between them shifted. Subtle, but sharp enough for me to feel it. Dinner was agony. Every laugh sounded hollow. Every glance felt like a coded exchange. Julia kept the conversation light, talking about business and flowers and travel plans, but my mind kept circling back to that album, to the date, to the vows. At one point, Lauren stood up to refill her glass. Her hand trembled slightly, and for just a second, our eyes met. She looked away first. Later that night, as we left Julia's house, Caleb slipped his arm around my shoulders. "You were quiet tonight," he said gently. I forced a small smile. "Just tired." He kissed the side of my head. "You've been working too hard." But as we walked to the car, I turned back toward the house, and through the window, I saw Julia and Lauren standing together, watching us leave. Julia's expression was unreadable. Lauren's was something else. Sad. Regretful, maybe. And I knew then that whatever truth they were hiding, it was tangled deep enough that no one dared speak it aloud. The next few days were unbearable. Every moment at home felt staged. Caleb would kiss me goodbye, ask about my day, and smile, like everything was fine. But at night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd feel him slip out of bed, pacing the hallway, whispering into his phone. One night, I finally followed him, barefoot, silent, heart racing. I stood in the shadow of the doorway as he sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed to his ear. "I know," he whispered. "I didn't plan it like this, but she doesn't know. Not yet." My throat tightened. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. His jaw tensed. "No," he said after a moment. "We can't do that. It's too risky." I stepped back before I could hear more. My pulse was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I didn't need to hear the rest. I'd heard enough to know that the lie wasn't just in the past, it was alive. Right there, in my home. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the dawn to come. Because I knew when it did, my world would never look the same again. By the next morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. My hands were trembling as I poured coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug in an uneven rhythm. Caleb noticed. "You okay?" he asked, leaning on the counter, still in his sleep shirt. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Just thinking." He smiled softly. "That's dangerous for you." He meant it as a joke, but it landed wrong. I looked up at him, really looked. The man I had loved for 7 years, who had held me through storms, shared secrets, whispered promises. How many of those promises had been borrowed from another woman? I needed answers, but I wasn't ready for the storm they'd bring. So I did something I'm not proud of. That evening, when he went out for his usual run, I searched his study. Caleb's desk was always neat. Too neat. The kind of neatness that doesn't invite curiosity. But that night, I opened every drawer. Bills, real estate contracts, client notes, nothing unusual until I found a small, locked box tucked behind a stack of tax folders. It was wooden, old, with a faint smell of cedar, like the box that had held the wedding album. I hesitated. My hands were shaking again, but I found the key inside his top drawer, taped beneath the organizer tray. Inside the box were letters, dozens of them, some sealed, some opened and creased from being read over and over. I picked one at random. "Caleb, I saw you today at the grocery store. You looked happy." "I'm glad. I really am. But sometimes I wonder if you ever think about what we lost, what we could have been if things were different." Lauren. My vision blurred. I grabbed another letter. "I'm not asking you to come back. I just want closure. We both deserve that." My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. There were dates on the letters, recent ones, not from years ago, from this year, even last month. That meant Lauren wasn't just a chapter from his past. She was still in it. When Caleb came home, I was sitting on the couch, the box beside me. He froze in the doorway, the color draining from his face. "Where did you—" I cut him off. "Who is she, Caleb? Tell me the truth." He ran a hand through his hair. Silent. His breathing quickened. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I snapped. "Because I found your wedding photos. You were married to her, weren't you?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." The room went dead silent. I don't remember setting the letters down, but suddenly they were scattered on the floor between us. "How long were you planning to keep that from me?" "I was going to tell you," he said, voice low, strained. One day." "One day?" I laughed bitterly. "After what?" "After she came to Thanksgiving. After your kids started calling her Aunt Lauren. When exactly was one day supposed to happen?" He sat down across from me, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "We were young," he said quietly. "It was a mistake. We got married too fast. It fell apart within a year. I left, and she moved on. I thought it was over. But it wasn't, was it?" I asked. "Because you've been writing to her. You've been seeing her." He shook his head. "No, I swear I haven't seen her in years." She reached out. She needed closure, like the letters said. "I never—" "Don't lie to me." My voice cracked on the last word. He looked up then, eyes red, desperate. "I didn't cheat on you, if that's what you think. I ended it with her before I met you. But I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. Julia knew. She found out back then, and she promised to keep it quiet. I didn't want you to judge me for my past." I stared at him, stunned. "You weren't ashamed enough to hide the photos better." "I forgot about them," he said weakly. That was when I realized he still didn't get it. He didn't understand that it wasn't just about the past. It was about the choice to build a marriage on half-truths, to let me sit across from his ex-wife's sister, calling her my best friend, without ever thinking I deserved to know. "Do you know what it feels like?" I whispered. "To sit at a dinner table with two women who share your husband's history, and you're the only one who doesn't know?" His eyes filled with tears. "I never meant for you to find out like this." "But you meant for me not to find out at all." He didn't answer. And that silence was worse than any confession. I picked up one of the letters, the one dated 2 weeks ago. "She still loves you," I said. "And maybe, just maybe, part of you loves her too." He flinched, and that was all the answer I needed. That night, I packed a bag. He tried to stop me, his voice breaking. "Please, don't do this. We can fix it." I turned to him, tears streaming down my face. "You can't fix what was never real to begin with." I drove to my sister's house and stayed there. The next morning, Julia called. I almost didn't answer, but Curiosity or maybe pain one. She sounded quiet, almost trembling. You found out, didn't you? I did. I wanted to tell you years ago, she said. But he begged me not to. And Lauren? She said she didn't want to ruin your happiness. My voice hardened. You both decided what I deserved to know. She didn't argue. She just whispered, I'm sorry, and hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring out the window at the pale morning light. And for the first time in years, I realized I'd been living inside someone else's story. One that had started long before I ever entered the picture. But that was about to change, because now, I was finally ready to write my own ending. The days that followed felt like walking through the aftermath of a storm. The house was quiet, my phone filled with unanswered calls and unread messages from Caleb. Each one began the same way. Please, we need to talk. But what was left to say when the truth had already been spoken? I stayed with my sister, Megan, in her small apartment above the bakery downtown. The smell of sugar and yeast from the shop below clung to everything sweet, heavy, comforting in a way I didn't expect. She didn't ask for details at first. She just made me tea, handed me a blanket, and let me cry until the tears ran dry. After a few days, she finally asked, what happened? I told her everything, from the wedding photo to the letters to Julia's silence. Megan sat there, her lips pressed into a tight line. That's betrayal, she said finally. Not just from him, but from her too. You trusted them both. I know, I whispered. And the worst part is, I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering how I missed it. The dinners, the smiles, the jokes they must have been laughing at me behind my back. She reached for my hand. No, sweetheart, people like that. People who lie so quietly they're not laughing. They're surviving on their own shame. You just didn't see it because you were too busy loving honestly. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Loving honestly. I had built a life on trust, and now every brick of it had crumbled. A week later, I went back home. Not to stay, but to collect what was mine. When I pulled into the driveway, Caleb's car was already there. He must have been waiting. He came out onto the porch as I stepped from the car, his eyes red-rimmed, his hair unkempt like he hadn't slept in days. Please, Emma, he started, voice shaking. Just come inside. Let's talk. I didn't move. I'm just here to pack my things. He stepped closer, desperation etched into every line of his face. You have to believe me. I didn't cheat on you. It was a mistake, years ago. It's over. Is it? I asked. Then why were you still writing to her? He hesitated. And that pause, just a second too long, was my answer. I wanted closure, he said finally. For both of us. I thought if I could explain, if I could make peace with it, it would help me be a better husband to you. I laughed, though it came out cracked and bitter. You don't become a better husband by hiding another marriage, Caleb. He stepped closer again. I love you. That's the truth. I looked up at him, my voice steady for the first time in days. No, you love the idea of redemption, but love doesn't grow from secrets. It dies in them. Inside, I moved through the house like a stranger.
Every room felt haunted by memories that no longer belonged to me. The breakfast table where we'd laughed over burnt toast. The living room where he'd once danced with me to old records.
All of it felt false now, like props in a story that had lost its meaning. As I packed my clothes, I found his wedding ring, the one from our ceremony, on the nightstand. He'd taken it off, maybe while pacing, maybe while thinking. Either way, it sat there like a quiet confession. When I came back downstairs, Caleb was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, holding the photo album I'd found. I should have burned this, he said quietly. No, I replied, my voice soft but cold. You should have told me the truth. He looked up then, tears gathering again. You were the first person who ever made me feel safe, and you were the first person who ever made me feel stupid, I said. Congratulations, Caleb. We both made history. I took the keys from the hook by the door, turned once more toward the man I thought I knew, and said the words that had been echoing in my chest since the night I found that photograph. I don't hate you, but I can't live inside your lie anymore. And I left. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I contacted a lawyer, started looking for a small apartment closer to the school, tried to remember who I was before I became someone's wife. But healing isn't neat. It's jagged, messy, unpredictable. Some mornings I woke up feeling strong. Other mornings I couldn't even make coffee without crying. Then, one afternoon, Julia came to see me. I almost didn't open the door when I saw her standing there, her hands clutching a small brown envelope. Please, she said softly. Just hear me out. I let her in, though my stomach was twisting. She looked pale, exhausted, like she'd aged 10 years in 1 week. I know you don't owe me anything, she began, but I need to tell you the truth. I crossed my arms. Saying nothing, she took a shaky breath. Yes, I knew about Caleb and Lauren. I was there at their wedding, and I knew they divorced. But when you met him, he seemed different. He told me he'd told you. I didn't realize until later that he hadn't, and by then, it felt too late to bring it up. Too late for honesty? I said sharply. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want to hurt you. By lying? I asked. That's not protection, Julia. That's pity. And I never asked for pity. She nodded, swallowing hard. You're right. I messed up. But for what it's worth, Lauren doesn't want him back. She's moved on. She's engaged now. The words hit me in a strange way. Relief, anger, disbelief, all tangled together. Julia held out the envelope. These are the letters, the ones he never sent. I found them in my shop yesterday. I think you should have them. I took it, my fingers brushing hers. I don't need to read them, I said. I already know how the story ends. She nodded once, eyes glassy, then turned and walked away. That night, I sat by the window in Megan's apartment, the city lights flickering below. I thought about love, the kind that blinds you, the kind that teaches you, and the kind that finally sets you free. I realized something then. Truth doesn't destroy love. Lies do, and I wasn't going to let someone else's lies define me anymore. Tomorrow, I'd call a realtor. Tomorrow, I'd start again. You can't live in a small town and expect your secrets to stay buried for long. Word travels faster than forgiveness around here, and soon enough, the whispers began. It started at the grocery store. A woman from church gave me that look. The one people use when they're curious, but pretending to be kind. Emma, I heard Caleb's been having a hard time, she said. Her voice dipped in sugar, but sharp as glass underneath. I just smiled. We both have. By the end of the week, everyone knew something had happened. They didn't know the details, just that Emma and Caleb weren't living together anymore. That I'd moved in with my sister, and that Julia's little antique shop had closed for personal reasons. Small-town gossip has a rhythm it builds, peaks, and dies. But it always leaves scars. 2 weeks later, I ran into Caleb at the farmer's market. He looked thinner, tired, like he'd been living off coffee and guilt. He stopped when he saw me, his hand tightening around a paper bag of apples. Emma, he said, almost a whisper. I nodded politely. Caleb, for a moment, neither of us spoke. The crowd around us kept moving, voices blending with the sound of rustling paper bags and children laughing. It felt almost cruel how normal the world could be while your own was still burning. He cleared his throat. I heard about your new job offer. Congratulations. He blinked. You heard? He smiled faintly. Julia told me. She said you're thinking about taking the position at the school in Portland. I hesitated. It was true I'd been offered a position there as a guidance counselor. A fresh start. I haven't decided yet. He nodded. You should. You've always wanted to work somewhere that made you feel like you mattered. That word mattered, it hit me harder than it should have. Because deep down, that's what all of this had been about. Trying to matter to someone who wasn't honest enough to deserve it. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see the man I loved or the man who lied. I just saw a man who'd lost himself in his own choices. I hope you find peace, Caleb, I said softly. But I can't carry your pain anymore. It's not mine to hold. He nodded, eyes glistening. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, I replied. But you did. And now we both have to live with that. Then I turned and walked away, my heart trembling but lighter than it had been in months. That night, Julia called me. Hey, she said, her voice tentative. I just wanted to say thank you for listening the other day. I'm trying to make things right. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the half-packed boxes in my sister's living room. You don't have to thank me, I said. Just be honest next time. With everyone, including yourself. I will, she said quietly. I promise. We hung up, and for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a strange, calm acceptance. Like the final page of a painful chapter had finally turned. A month later, I accepted the job in Portland. On my last morning in town, I stood in front of my old house one last time. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown, but the wind was gentle, carrying the faint scent of lilacs, the same flowers Caleb had planted our first spring together. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a life that had taught me everything I needed to know about strength, love, and letting go. Before I got into the car, I took one last deep breath and whispered to the empty house, "Thank you for the lessons." Then I drove away past the church, past the bakery, past the place where my heart had broken, and into the beginning of something new. Months later, in my new apartment overlooking the river, I opened my journal and wrote, "Sometimes love isn't the ending, it's the teacher. And sometimes the person who hurts you most gives you the strength to find the one who never will." I closed the book and smiled to myself, because I wasn't broken anymore. I was just finally free. When I look back now, I can almost laugh at how long I mistook quietness for peace. I used to believe that if I just kept things steady, if I smiled through disappointment and filled the silences with forgiveness, love would eventually feel safe again. But love built on secrets is like a house on shifting sand. It might stand for a while, but the cracks always find their way to the surface. Moving to Portland was more than a change of address. It was a quiet rebirth. I rented a small apartment near the river. Nothing fancy, just enough space for a coffee table, a few plants, and peace. Mornings became my sanctuary. I'd sit by the window with a cup of black coffee, listening to the sound of the water and thinking about how strange it was to feel content in solitude. For the first time in years, my reflection didn't look like someone waiting for an apology. It looked like a woman learning to breathe again. I started writing small things at first. Notes to myself. Letters I'd never send. One of them was to Caleb. "You were my lesson in courage, not in failure. You showed me what it costs to stay silent, and what it means to finally speak." And another to Julia. "I forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because I deserve to let go." There's something healing about seeing words on paper about naming the pain so it can stop naming you. The funny thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break your heart. It rearranges it. It forces you to build new rooms inside yourself. Ones made of boundaries, honesty, and self-respect. And in those rooms, you begin to live differently. I learned to say no without guilt. I learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. And I learned that closure doesn't come from someone else's apology, it comes when you stop needing one. A few months ago, I ran into a former colleague at a cafe. She asked if I was seeing anyone new, and I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm just seeing myself clearly for the first time in a long time." She laughed, but I meant it. Sometimes, the happiest ending isn't a new love story. It's rediscovering the person you were before someone taught you to doubt her. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, the kind that shakes your trust in everyone, even yourself, please hear me. You will heal. Not overnight, not easily, but deeply. You'll wake up one day and realize the ache has softened. You'll catch yourself smiling for no reason. You'll see that the ending you thought destroyed you actually saved you. Because love doesn't always stay, but lessons do. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say isn't "I forgive you." It's "I'm finally free." Would you have walked away like I did? Or would you have stayed and tried to rebuild what was already broken? Tell me in the comments, I'll be reading, as always. And if my story reminded you of your own, make sure you subscribe and share. Some hearts need to hear that it's okay to start over. Until next time, this was Emma's story. A story about truth, healing, and finding peace in the ruins of what once was.